Friends, our story begins in New York City. This is our hero, Joe Nixon, an advertising executive considered one of the biggest creative minds at his agency. That morning, he is on the phone with his doctor girlfriend Jennifer. Jennifer tells him she has received a major offer from the Mayo Clinic, but she is thinking about turning it down because she wants to stay here with Joe and begin the next chapter of their lives together. As soon as Joe arrives at the office, a strange group chat appears on his phone. A group of guys accidentally added the wrong number, and that number happens to belong to Joe. They are discussing plans to fly to Miami for their friend Mason's bachelor party, and their cheap rental apparently looks like a jail cell because none of them has much money. As a joke, Joe sends these complete strangers some money for drinks, and in return, they invite him to Miami. But the real shock comes inside the meeting room. Joe presents a vodka campaign aimed at Gen Z, stuffing the pitch with so much modern slang that it immediately feels forced. The presentation goes so badly that a junior employee named Daniel openly tells him it was cringe. Later, his boss, Terry, reminds Joe that his last 3 campaigns have failed with Gen Z, and then says something that completely shakes him. If Joe cannot land unlimited vodka as a client, the CCO position will go to someone younger like Daniel, because the agency no longer wants to look old. Joe refuses to give up and asks for one final chance, just 72 hours. Terry agrees to the deal. If Joe lands the campaign, the CCO position is his, but if he fails, his job is over. His friend Barry advises him to finally start his own company, but Joe is afraid because he has spent 10 years climbing this corporate ladder. Just then, the same group chat starts buzzing again, and an idea suddenly hits him. If he spends time around these guys and studies them up close, he can build a pitch using the words and behavior of the exact generation the CEO wants to reach. Joe offers to cover the entire trip, and the guys agree. While packing at home, Joe tells Jennifer everything. He did not get the promotion, and Terry thinks he is getting too old for the job. Then Joe says he needs to start making better decisions for both of them, and suddenly gets down on one knee. Tears filled Jennifer's eyes because she thinks Joe is about to propose. But big twist, Joe is only on one knee because he is packing something into his bag, and his big announcement is that he is going to Miami. Jennifer feels completely embarrassed. When she brings up marriage, Joe makes it clear that his career is in danger and marriage is the last thing on his mind right now. Jennifer sarcastically tells him to enjoy the bachelor party before shutting the door. As soon as Joe arrives in Miami, he finally meets the guys he'll be spending the next 3 days with. First is Nick, the best man and the person planning the entire weekend. Then there is Mason Moses, our groom, who is about to marry his fiancée Emily. The third guy is Hunter, who is still dealing with a recent breakup. And the fourth is Freshman, who got that nickname because he had to repeat his freshman year twice. The moment they see the mansion, everyone loses their minds. Nick explains his plan. Tonight they are taking a party bus to South Beach, and the goal is to make the weekend as wild as possible. Joe gives them so much alcohol as a gift that even the guys are shocked. We also learn that Nick is unemployed, and this weekend means almost everything to him. Nick then pulls Joe aside and tells him directly that his presence feels a little weird. He thought Joe was around 50 years old, even though Joe is actually 40. Nick explains that this is his and Mason's final weekend together before Mason gets married, so he wants everything to be perfect. Joe promises he will stay out of the way, and this is where the foundation for the big twist is quietly planted. Somewhere else, a man is showing his boss security footage of Joe entering a locked room inside the mansion, the boss's father's private closet, and taking clothes from inside. The boss, whose name is Jays, sees it as an opportunity to make extra money. He tells the man to keep the security deposit and double the cleaning fee, but then he gives another order: keep an eye on this guy. Meanwhile, Joe walks out in front of the group wearing those same flashy clothes. At the liquor store, Joe secretly takes notes on what these younger guys drink and what they like mixing together. The guys catch him doing it, but Joe quickly talks his way out of the situation. Then, trying to impress everyone, he drinks 2 entire bottles of Pepto-Bismol, claiming that coating your stomach before drinking is the smart thing to do. On the way back home, Nick makes everyone participate in an emotional check-in, where each person has to explain how they are feeling. Freshman's answer is easily the funniest. He says he is feeling Miami. Joe decides to skip the therapy-style conversation and focuses on enjoying the night instead. Then an old song starts playing and Joe gets up to dance. He spins around for a while, and guess what happens? Those 2 bottles of Pepto finally come back to haunt him. Joe suddenly gets sick all over the guys, covering everyone in pink, and the party ends right there. Joe says he will go to an ATM, get some cash, and buy everyone new clothes. But while Joe is standing there, holding a bunch of cash, a stranger mistakes him for someone managing the guys for illegal street activity. And soon a police officer arrives. The officer becomes suspicious because the neighborhood is known for questionable late-night activity. The guys come over to clear things up, but their answers only make the situation worse. They admit that Joe met them through a random text and bought alcohol for them. The officer starts treating it like a much more serious criminal situation. Suddenly, the guys yell, "Loop-de-loop," and sprint off in different directions, leaving Joe completely alone. Joe runs too. The cops chase after him, and during the chaos, he somehow manages to escape. But when he finally gets away, he realizes he is holding a police officer's badge. And this badge is going to become very important later. Later that night, Joe secretly sends Barry all the footage from the day. He also calls Jennifer, but all he gets is her voicemail. Barry watches the footage and immediately gets excited. Using the real lives of these guys as part of the campaign is a genius idea in his opinion, but they need more material. Joe tells him the guys have already refused to be recorded anymore. That is when Barry reveals his secret. He secretly packed his smart glasses and camera necklace inside Joe's bag. Meanwhile, the guys discuss whether they should send Joe away, but then they remember that the place they are staying in is booked under his name. The next morning, Joe apologizes and promises to make it up to them by getting everyone a yacht. But the yacht plan falls apart because there has been an error with the reservation. That is when Joe remembers the stolen badge. He flashes it at the security guy on a party boat and manages to get the entire group on board. On the boat, Joe finds Mason sitting alone and looking a little down. Joe assumes he is having cold feet, but Mason quickly makes it clear that there is nothing like that going on. He simply misses his fiancée and is actually excited about becoming a husband. What really bothers him is that ever since he got engaged, Nick has constantly made fun of him for settling down. Mason says the whole point of life is to build something meaningful with another person, and if you have already found that person, why keep waiting? And then comes the moment that completely changes the direction of the story. Feeling hungry, Joe wanders into a private room inside the boat, and sitting there is Jay's, the same man who owns the property where the guys are staying. The door closes behind Joe. Jay's repeatedly asks whether Joe is a cop, and to prove that he is not, Joe is pressured into taking an illegal substance. Joe explains that he stays away from that stuff because the last time he tried it, he completely lost control. But with Jay's threatening him, Joe is forced to take it twice. Big twist. A short time later, something completely changes inside Joe. His walk changes, his voice changes, and when the guys call him Joe, he looks at them and asks who Joe even is. He now introduces himself as Ricardo Montana. After another man gets into an argument with him, Ricardo Mode Joe completely loses control. He gets into a wild fight, starts breaking things, and declares himself the king of Miami. As everyone escapes, he tells the group to head for the horses, which turn out to be jet skis. The entire gang jumps on them and speeds away. Meanwhile, Jay's gets the news that someone has taken his entire shipment. His people pull up a video showing Joe calling himself Ricardo Montana. And suddenly one name is spreading throughout Miami's criminal underworld. Not long after that, Nick tells Joe that he should sit out tonight's plans. Joe fires back that Nick's real problem is that he is afraid of losing his best friend, and maybe he should put some of that energy into figuring out his own career. The argument gets heated, and Joe makes it clear that he is coming whether Nick likes it or not. That night, there is a surprisingly emotional moment. Nick gives Mason the most valuable thing he owns, an old scrapbook everyone simply calls the book. Nick started it when he was 12 years old, and every important memory the two friends have shared since then has been saved inside it. Mason tells Joe that after this weekend, Joe deserves a place in the book too. It means a lot to Joe, but Nick clearly does not like the idea and quickly takes the book back. On the phone, Barry tells Joe that the new footage is incredible, but there is still one major problem. There are no women in it, and Terry specifically wants a female perspective for the campaign. Meanwhile, the legend of Ricardo Montana has spread so far that people connected to Miami's underground scene begin approaching Joe with gifts, believing he is some kind of powerful new boss. At the club, Joe becomes Hunter's wingman, and that is when the same bachelorette group arrives. Hunter meets Scarlett, and the two immediately hit it off. Later that night, Nick finally admits to Joe that even though he is weird, and definitely older than the rest of them, having him around has actually been pretty cool. The girls invite everyone to join them in their stretch limo and head to another club. Outside the bar, Joe gets a call from Jennifer, and she immediately hears the loud music and girls in the background. Joe tries to explain, but Jennifer has already had enough. She tells him that if she were truly his priority, he would be here with her instead of partying in Miami, and maybe choosing to build a life together was a mistake. Then she drops the final blow. By the time Joe gets home, she will already be gone. Completely crushed, Joe tells Mason everything. Mason brings up an old viral relationship quiz and asks him 2 questions, but Joe has to answer without thinking. Does he love this woman? And does he want to spend the rest of his life with her? Joe answers yes to both. Mason tells him he passed the test and gives him some simple advice. Go home and tell her you love her. If she is really the right person, she will accept you for exactly who you are. And then comes another big twist. The girls keep handing everyone shots, and one by one their eyes start getting heavy. Soon the entire group passes out inside the limo. The last thing Joe hears before everything goes black is one of the girls laughing. When they wake up, everyone is lying on a deserted shoreline. Their phones are gone. Their wallets are gone. Those girls were actually thieves who had set them up. But there is an even bigger loss. They also took the scrapbook. Nick completely loses it. As the group starts walking, they realize they are trapped on a small island. Then they spot a boat, and the man driving it agrees to take them back to Miami. But as soon as they board, the guys start getting suspicious, because this does not look like an ordinary fishing boat. Locked crates are stacked everywhere. They open one of them, and what they find inside immediately makes everyone nervous. Freshman notices that every box has Japanese writing on it, and this is when we discover that Freshman is actually a hyper-polyglot. He explains that the crates contain whale organs, which are extremely valuable on the black market. In other words, these men are smugglers. Suddenly, a voice comes from outside. The U.S. Coast Guard is ordering the boat to stop. The smugglers immediately start firing. The guys stay hidden below deck because Joe explains that if they go upstairs now, the Coast Guard could assume they are part of the same operation. Then suddenly, everything goes quiet. The smugglers have jumped into the water, which means nobody is driving the boat anymore. The guys break through the door, grab the packaged whale organs to use as flotation devices, and jump into the ocean. While they are swimming, a jellyfish stings Joe right across the face. Once they finally reach shore, Mason sincerely tells Joe that he saved their lives and says he definitely wants Joe at his wedding, but somewhere else, a much bigger problem is already forming. Jays and his boss have finally discovered who Joe really is, and even worse, he is the same guy currently staying at one of their properties. Back at the house, Mason suggests using Joe's laptop to track their phones and recover everything that was stolen, and that is when another big twist is revealed. The moment they open the laptop, they discover all the secretly recorded photos and videos, along with another file, Joe's unlimited vodka campaign pitch deck. The truth is finally exposed. Joe did not come here to become their friend. He came here to secretly study and record them. Even the camera necklace was fake. At first, the room goes completely silent, and then everything explodes. Hunter tells Joe that he used them without their permission, while Freshman is so hurt that he says he does not even feel Miami anymore. In the middle of the argument, Joe accidentally reveals something Mason had told him privately, that Nick has the emotional maturity of a child. Nick is devastated. Then Mason finally admits that ever since the engagement, talking to Nick has become exhausting because Nick makes fun of him every 5 minutes. For Nick, teasing him was simply his way of showing love, but Mason makes it clear that he cannot accept that anymore. Furious, Nick throws Joe's laptop into the water, and at that moment, Mason himself tells Joe that he needs to leave. Later, Joe sits alone at a bar, thinking about everything he has lost. Then he suddenly notices something across the room. The same girls who robbed them are setting up another group with the exact same trick. Joe somehow manages to force his way into their car and starts yelling to warn the other guys. Complete chaos breaks out. Joe struggles with all 4 women, and the entire car turns into a disaster. But somehow, Joe manages to grab the bag containing everything they stole, including the one thing that matters most, the scrapbook. But Joe barely gets a chance to celebrate. The guys come running toward him with terrifying news. Mason has been kidnapped. The criminal group believes Ricardo Montana has come to take over their territory. Their demand is simple: return 30 kilos of their missing shipment by 8 o'clock tonight or Mason is finished, and contacting the police will only make things worse. Joe initially says there is no way he can help. but then something suddenly clicks in his mind. He races over to the jet skis, opens one of them, and discovers the missing 30 kilos hidden inside. Ricardo Mode Joe had accidentally escaped with their entire shipment earlier that night. They call the burner phone, but the answer on the other end is simple. They will only speak to Ricardo Montana, or Mason is done for. And now comes the craziest problem of all. To bring Ricardo back, Joe has to take that illegal substance again. For Mason's sake, he agrees. The first attempt does nothing, so Nick makes him take even more, and suddenly Joe's eyes change. Ricardo Montana is back. On the phone, Ricardo warns them that if Mason gets even a single scratch, they are starting a war. Then he throws out an enormous lie. He claims he has officially partnered with the Yakuza. The man on the other end says the Yakuza already works with him. So Ricardo hands the phone to Freshman, and Freshman confidently starts speaking Japanese, claiming that the Yakuza now stands with Ricardo Montana. The man is completely thrown off and finally sends them the address for the exchange. But the moment they reach the meeting point, the effect of the substance begins wearing off. Ricardo disappears, leaving behind a terrified Joe, and that is when the big twist is revealed. The real boss of the organization arrives, and he is Jay's father. Surprisingly, he is even angrier about Joe wearing his late father's clothes than he is about the missing shipment. He explains that his father spent his entire life being disrespected because he was a little person. On top of that, the boss personally contacted the Yakuza and confirmed that they have never even heard of Ricardo Montana. A weapon comes out, and Joe is asked one simple question. Who exactly is Ricardo Montana? And this is where Joe finally drops the act. He admits that Ricardo is nobody. Joe is simply a man who crashed these guys' bachelor party because he is scared of getting older. Ricardo Montana is not real. He is just a fake personality that comes out when Joe loses control under the influence. His real name is Joe Nixon, a 40-year-old creative executive. He admits that he took the jet skis, but had absolutely no idea there was an illegal shipment hidden inside them. And most importantly, these guys had nothing to do with any of it. Joe caused the entire mess, so if someone has to face the consequences, it should be him. And then something happens that nobody could have expected. Tears appear in the boss's eyes. He walks closer to Joe and says, Joe still smells like his father because he is wearing the man's coat. Instead of hurting him, the boss tells Joe that he is simply too old for this kind of madness and needs to settle down. Settling down changed his own life, he explains, and his son Jay's is now his greatest source of pride. His advice to Joe is simple. Make the people who matter most your priority. Tell them you love them, and tell them you want them beside you for the rest of your life. Then he orders his men to release Mason. Before Joe leaves, the only thing he asks for is his father's coat back. Once everything is finally over, Joe sincerely apologizes to the guys. They admit that, yes, he completely ruined their weekend, but he also made it impossible to forget. Because of that, Joe has officially earned a place in the book. Joe leaves them with one piece of advice. Life is going to throw countless curveballs at them, and choosing the right path will always be their responsibility. But no matter what happens, they should protect the circle of friends they already have. Everyone hugs, and Joe smiles before finally admitting that he is feeling Miami too. The moment Joe returns to New York, he receives a message from Nick. Nick managed to recover the hard drive from Joe's destroyed laptop, and even created a video for him using the footage, and it turns out incredible. But Joe only has one place on his mind: Jennifer. He rushes to see her and asks the same two questions Mason asked him. Does he love her, and does he want to spend the rest of his life with her? The answer to both is yes. Jennifer sarcastically reminds him that those questions came from an old viral quiz, but Joe tells her that does not make his answers any less true. Then he makes the biggest decision of his life. Forget the pitch. He is starting his own company, becoming his own boss, and if necessary, he is even willing to move so he can build his life around Jennifer instead of constantly putting his career first. The two finally embrace. In the end, the story shifts to Mason's wedding. Joe is now running his own company, and Jennifer is his fiancée. Jennifer tells him that he clearly had a huge impact on these guys, but Joe admits the truth. They had an even bigger impact on him. Then the group brings back their old tradition, the emotional check-in. Mason says he is feeling married. Nick says he is feeling employed. Hunter says he has finally escaped his slump, and Freshman says he can definitely feel the wedding energy too. Finally, Joe smiles and announces that it looks like he may have another bachelor party to plan very soon. Friends, the message of this story is simple. Joe already had almost everything, yet he kept running because deep down he was afraid of getting older. Only after nearly losing everything did he realize that age was never the real problem. His priorities were. So now the question is for you. If you had only 72 hours to change your life, What would you chase first? Your career or the people who matter most?